This podcast is brought to you by Meteorate.
Welcome to the second edition of the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Show podcast, featuring myself, Homer Papantonio, and Dr. Ross Walker. And this week we're talking about, medical myths and the blue zones, a whole range of things. Roscoe.
Yep.
First area.
Well, what I wanted to do first was talk about a really interesting medical study that's come out in the last week or so on the link between tattoos and lymphomas. Because it's interesting, so many people these days are getting tattooed. And when you think about the logic of this, you're putting ink on your skin that has all of these horrible toxins in them, and you think it's not going to cause you any harm at all. And this has shown. They took a whole bunch of people who'd been tattooed and compared them to people who hadn't been tattooed. And they looked at people who then developed lymphoma, and they found that if the ones who had tattoos, there was about a 20% increased incidence for lymphoma. Now, that doesn't mean 1 in 5 people who get tattooed and get a lymphoma. It doesn't mean that at all. It means the incidence goes up 20%. Now, what that in reality means, if your incidence of lymphoma is 1%, a 20% increase takes you from 1% to 1.2%. That's all that means. So it's not a huge increase, but it still says that there is potential harm in doing this stuff. And the other problem is once you've got the tattoo, you get even worse risk of lymphoma if you try and have it removed, because you're breaking up the ink into your circulation. And what happens, what a lymphoma is really a blood-borne cancer of the lymph nodes. So basically the lymph nodes swell, and the cells within the lymph nodes change. Typically the B cells, you get B cell lymphomas, T cell lymphomas, there's Hodgkin's disease, non-Hodgkin's disease. And it's just a slight increase. So look, I say all the time, you don't put a bumper sticker on a Bentley. Why on earth would you put a tattoo on your body? I think it's complete nonsense.
Because I know a lot of people. Interestingly, a lot of people in the medical fraternity have got tattoos. I know of quite a few doctors that have got tattoos, and so we're establishing here. Ross, is cause and effect. By having a tattoo, you've got an increased likelihood of lymphomas and
It's a bit like many women have breast implants, and associated with breast implants is this rare cancer called an anaplastic lymphoma. Again, similar thing. You're putting foreign bodies in your body that can slightly increase your risk for lymphoma. There's been linked with, say, dark hair dyes. So Jackie Onassis, who's married to JFK, of course, she died of a lymphoma, and she used to always dye her hair very black. So black hair dyes are also associated with lymphoma. But it doesn't mean everyone who's going to dye their hair black is going to get a lymphoma, nor is everyone with a tattoo going to get a lymphoma. You're just slightly increasing your risk. And that's the problem. Younger people aren't particularly risk averse. When you get to our old fart stage, you get much more risk averse. You just don't do these things. So anyhow, that's the medical news of the week. I thought I'd just discuss that. And then we move on to future of medicine. Now, again, there are so many aspects of this future of medicine. And I think this is the interesting thing. Let me make the point to everyone listening. I'm an anally retentive neurotic. So I take about 40 supplements in the morning, 10 in the evening. And it's a bit of a pain. It's a bit tedious to do it, but I do it because it's part of my health program. 80% is how I look after myself. 10% is any pharmaceutical drugs I may or may not use. And 10% are the use of supplements.
And Ross, I like the analogy you use with supplements, because there's a few interesting facets of supplements. Not all supplements actually are good for you. Some may actually purportedly cause cancer and things of that ilk.
I wouldn't say
but I like the analogy that you use about vitamins compared to normal pharmaceuticals. It just takes.
Okay. Well, let me get that.
Yep.
Yeah. That analogy is pharmaceutical drugs are like a high performance motor car, get you from A to B very quickly, but with a potential of crashing and killing yourself.
Mm.
So with a high performance motor car, you need seatbelts, you need safety mechanisms within the car, you need to follow the road rules. And the same thing with pharmaceutical drugs. You need very rigid randomized controlled clinical trials with hard endpoints like what are you reducing in terms of heart attack, stroke, sudden death, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But with supplements, supplements are like a bicycle. Get you from A to B much slower, but you just need to wear a helmet and keep away from cars, and you get a bit of exercise with it. So
and it's non-violent, and
yeah.
non-polluting, which means there's no harm.
There's no harm to your body,
yep.
But it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. So the evidence to take supplements doesn't need to be as strong as the evidence to take pharmaceutical drugs. So all you need with supplements are what we call surrogate markers. So, for example, in the last episode, I spoke about what I believe to be the best natural product in the world, which is the bergamot BJE 100. And that has strong surrogate markers to show that you are shifting from small to large LDL, small to large HDL, reducing blood sugar, improving fatty liver. But there's no evidence to show that it stops heart attack, stroke, or whatever. But we're extrapolating that from the surrogate data. So that's the difference between. But getting what I want to talk about today.
Wait, can I just? I know, but before we get on, so can you draw the same analogy between chemotherapy and natural approaches to cancer, similar to what pharmaceutical versus supplements?
Of course, chemotherapy is very heavy therapy, but it has the potential to cure your cancer.
Mm.
Whereas natural therapies, I think, are in many cases just an adjunct and should be used in combination. You've got to make sure that the natural therapies aren't going to interact with the cancer effect and vice versa. And so it's a matter of anyone who develops a cancer or develops heart disease should be working with a sympathetic doctor. And see, doctors should be two things to people. They should be advisors and they should be servants. Nothing worse when you go to a doctor and the doctor says, oh, that natural stuff's rubbish, you shouldn't be taking it. You immediately feel guilty and say, oh, I'm not going to tell him anymore or her that I'm taking this stuff because I've been made to feel guilty about it. So I think there has to be that compassion and that understanding that people, and look, I'm an integrative cardiologist. People want this stuff. They want to know that there are things that they can do over and above just swallowing a pill to lower their cholesterol that's going to improve their health, as well as the major focus, which should be on lifestyle. But the topic of future of medicine today is nanotechnology. Now, what's that's all about? So I mentioned the 40 pills that I take because I believe there will come a time in the not too distant future when there'll be the Ross Walker program, the Homer program, the Bill Bloggs program, where you take all the stuff you're taking every day, put it into one nano pill, and you just swallow one pill a day that has controlled release, that works very well, just a tiny little pill you swallow every day. The technology's there. We just need some clever companies to come out with the ability to do this, because at the moment, there's a lot of this one-size-fits-all stuff, and it doesn't work anywhere near as well as the nanotechnology putting all the stuff here on, because unfortunately at the moment, many people, because we're living so much longer, are taking 3, 4, 5 pharmaceuticals and maybe 10 supplements every day. It's a lot of pills. It's a big commitment and it's expensive.
But the question is, who is going to monitor this nano pill?
Well, again, it's got to be big business, big pharma, or whoever wants to do it. But I think it's one of the next big trends in medicine to move towards nanotechnology. So that's nanotechnology. So let's now move on to the body of evidence. And I'm talking here about vitamin D. So, where vitamin D, what is vitamin D typically called, Homer?
Sunlight vitamin.
Exactly. And we get vitamin D from spending about 15 minutes in the sun during the non-burning times before 10 and after about 3 o'clock. And that's the way.
But the darker you are, the more vitamin D you need. Indeed, people with my complexion, olive skin, they are quite often deprived in Australia. Well, not so much in Australia, but in areas where there's not a lot of sunlight. And vitamin D,
Absolutely.
as we know, has got profound effects on our health, as was demonstrated during COVID.
But here's the problem. So just in Australia alone, a third of the adult population are low in vitamin D, have levels below about 50 nanograms per mil. And so that what you want is for it to be sitting between 50 to 140. I like people to be sitting around 100. So I believe that everyone should be taking vitamin D, 1,000 international units, 2 capsules in the morning every day, and also getting a bit of time in the sun if possible. And every now and then having your vitamin D levels measured, because some people just have naturally high vitamin D and some people need more than what I'm suggesting. But let me tell you what the benefits are. So low vitamin D is linked to osteoporosis, heart disease, cancer, multiple sclerosis, type 2 diabetes, asthma, depression. Need I go on? During COVID, you mentioned COVID. It showed that people who had vitamin D levels in their bloodstream around 100 had much lower rates of COVID complication, COVID death, etc., etc. So another study, 25,000 people over 5 years in the US, placebo-controlled trial. Those who took the 2,000 units of vitamin D a day had a 25% reduction in autoimmune disease. So vitamin D is so important in so many aspects of immune function, of cholesterol metabolism, of just general health, which is why there's that link with all of those different issues.
Because we mentioned we mentioned sorry, Ross, it's a sunlight vitamin. There are other benefits from sunlight quite apart from the vitamin D. Isn't there?
Of course.
And should we be aspiring, if we can, if we're lucky enough to live in areas like the Gold Coast where it's pretty much sunny all year round, that you try and get the sunlight, the vitamin D and everything else from sunlight rather than just vitamin D supplements. Again, we come back to What do you think?
Again, look, I hear what you're saying, and I of course think sunlight's a good way to do it, but we also have to understand that Australia is the skin cancer capital of the world. And a lot of people take on this sunlight message and say, no, I need sunlight. And then they get themselves cancers. So, and also many of us have sedentary jobs where we're inside and we don't get that sun exposure. So I still think it's important to get some vitamin D to the system. I want to ask you a question. I mean, you know when is the worst time to have a heart attack?
When
you're playing charades.
So, have we spoken about some of the medical myths yet? Researchers from the University of Westminster a few years ago performed a small, fairly superficial study of about 100 people commissioned by Love Film Laboratories, sounds like a whatever, and that discovered watching a horror movie can burn up to 400 calories per minute. The researchers measured the heart rate, oxygen intake and carbon dioxide output of participants who were watching scary movies and found that they were burning more than 80 times more calories than usual. So, and then they went on... One of the doctors said that as the pulse quickens and the blood pumps around the body faster, the body experiences a massive surge in adrenaline. It is the release of fast-acting adrenaline produced during short bursts of intense stress, or in this case brought on by fear, which is known to lower the appetite, increase the basic metabolic rate. But what's even more interesting, they said they correlated certain films with horror films with an increase in calories. So if you're watching The Shining, that burns 184 calories per minute. Jaws, 161 calories. The Exorcist, 158 calories. And Nightmare on Elm Street with 300. But the big one was the Texan Chainsaw Massacre, 400 calories per minute. So there you go.
That might be true. You are burning more calories when you're under some form of terror. But what they're not talking about is the deleterious effects of adrenaline. Because what adrenaline does is put your blood pressure through the roof,
Yes.
constricts your blood flow to vital organs, and can even induce a heart attack by itself. So I don't think that should be someone saying, oh, look, I'm going to watch a horror movie rather than exercise. Because when you exercise, there is a graded increase in blood flow to your muscles, to the heart, whereas when you're under terror, there's that constriction in arteries. You don't get the blood flow where it should be going. So I find that really disturbing.
What about this one from? What about this myth from Professor Polyuria? He says we need to drink 8 glasses of water per day.
Yes. Well,
what's the story there, Ross?
Look, can I say this is one of those things where someone about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, came out thinking, gee, it'd be a good idea if we flushed the kidneys out by having 8 glasses of water a day. People who do that, Homo, just spend half the day in the bathroom. And there is actually a downside to having too much water.
Yes.
There's a thing called hyponatremia.
Yes.
Now, hyponatremia is low sodium in the bloodstream. So a lot of people get low sodium and they think, oh, I need more salt. No, you need less water. And in fact, there's a condition called the syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. And that is due to a whole lot of different diseases that can do that. And your sodium levels get quite low. And if your sodium drops below about 120, you can start fitting. Gets below about 115, you can go into a coma. So, and that can happen if you've got syndrome of inappropriate ADH, or you have what we call psychogenic polydipsia, which is the madness of drinking too much water.
So for the active person, the athlete, that's always a very interesting area, isn't it? How much the fluid intake. You can either dehydrate, polyhydrate, hyperhydrate, the whole lot. And what should you be drinking?
Olympics?
Yep.
Well, do you remember back in the Olympics, however, that woman who was doing the marathon, and she almost looked like she was having a seizure or a stroke as she ran into the arena. Everyone remembers that really telling scene. And she almost certainly had significant hyponatremia from overhydrating during the run.
Yes.
So I don't think people should be hydrating with water during marathons or triathlons or whatever. I think they should be using some sort of electrolyte replacement so they are getting the sodium and the potassium when they're exercising rather than just having straight water. I think it's a foolish thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, look, I think we've covered a lot of that. And I just want to finish off with the thought of the week, then get into our topic for the week. So the thought of the week is, did you know, Homer, that people have 10 to 15 natural nuts per day have up to a 50% reduction in cardiovascular disease?
My wife was very interested in this. You know why? Because she lives with a nut.
Why?
She lives with a nut.
Oh, I know that. That's called stating the bleeding obvious. But yes.
I just
wanted to say to you that Sister Teresa was known for her very high intelligence. She was, in fact, the smartest person in the convent. She was also better known as none the wiser. But anyhow.
So what nuts? What are the best nuts to have, apart from the Homer nut?
Okay, well, I think any nuts are good for you, but the three that I favour are walnuts, almonds, and macadamias. They're the ones that have really strong evidence, but peanuts are still pretty good. Even cashews are good, but they're the ones I favour. The important thing is to have natural nuts, not the salted, roasted variety that have been dosed in hydrogenated fats and other horrible things. So that's the thought of the week. Let's move on now to the blue zones.
Blue zones, which is very close to my heart, being of Greek extraction and Italian extraction.
Absolutely.
There is an area in Greece known as the blue zone, which is what particular island is it?
Ikaria,
yes.
Ikaria.
So what is it about these
Ikaria.
people? What is it? They live to 100 plus, whatever. What is it about them?
Yeah, they have an extraordinary amount of centenarians, so people that go beyond 100. So in our community, we have about 1 in 10,000. They have about 16 per 10,000 go beyond 100. And they're good livers beyond 100 as well. So what we call super centenarians. So let's say where those 5 areas are. There's Okinawa in Japan, Icaria in Greece,
Yeah.
Sardinia in Italy,
See.
the Nicoya province of Costa Rica, and the Seventh-day Adventists living in Loma Linda in California. They're all part of these blue zones, and they've got some very common features amongst them. Firstly, very importantly, they don't smoke. Secondly, their diet is mainly plant-based. So see, and this is the thing about diets. People say, oh, you shouldn't have saturated fat, you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have that. No, it's what you should have that's important. And what you should be having is 2 or 3 pieces of fruit per day, 3 to 5 servings of vegetables per day. And tragically, in our society, less than 10% of people do that. But in the blue zones, most of them do that every day. And often they grow those natural fruits and vegetables in their backyard.
So none of the Greeks
the plant-based diet.
Were the Greeks smoking? Were they?
No, not in these.
In the
Look,
blue
a lot of people in Europe smoke. A lot of people in Europe smoke, but not so much in the blue zones. The blue zones, they don't smoke. That's a common feature. See, Dan Buettner, who basically researched all of this, he's an American journalist. He put all of these things together. So don't smoke, plant-based diet, and they've never heard of damn gyms over there, but they're moving all day. So often they're in Icaria, they're on the side of a hill. So they're moving up and down the hill, walking. They don't have cars or anything else. They just move.
And lifting
move
things.
And lifting. And so it's called natural movement. And they don't specifically exercise, but they're constantly moving and stressing their body a little bit to get the body going. So that's very, very important.
And as you pointed out, it's not only what they eat, it's how they eat it. You know, the social setting and the relaxed setting that they eat it. They don't scoff it all down in front of the TV. It's a social gathering that enhances them. And obviously the benefits of all that social interaction. Sorry. Yep, I'm taking your thunder away.
And that's really important. No, you're not taking my thunder away at all. You're making some really important points, because that gets onto what I believe to be the best diet in the world, the only diet that has a strong evidence base, which is the Mediterranean diet. But it's more the Mediterranean lifestyle. So they have a big breakfast full of natural fruits and grains. They go and burn off any extra carbs in the hot Mediterranean sun in the morning. They come home for their biggest meal at lunchtime, where they have pasta and a couple of glasses of wine, and they burn off any extra carbs in the hot Mediterranean sun in the afternoon. But they also have an afternoon sleep. So, for example, there was a study of 23,000 Greeks to show that those who had an afternoon sleep had a 40% reduction in cardiovascular disease. The working Greeks, not many of those left, but the working Greeks, sorry, only joking, only listen. Anyone finds any comments that
blasphemy.
If they find any comments offensive, get over it. It's called humor. Ricky Gervais, the second greatest comedian on the planet after Homer. Ricky Gervais once said, "You find it offensive, I find it funny. That's why I'm happier than you." Yes. So just laugh. It's a joke.
Yeah. And everyone laughs. And even the Greeks, all these blue zones have that ability to laugh at themselves.
That's part of it as well.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is afternoon sleep, 40% reduction in cardiovascular disease just by doing that. And they have not much to eat at night time, and they don't move much after that. So it's the movement during the day and the timing of their food, as you say, and the fact that it's a relaxed communal meal, which gets to the next few points about the people living in the blue zones. Often they have a strong belief, whether in some sort of faith, and I don't want to get too much into religion in this, but I'm saying they have a belief, they have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and they have a very strong sense of family and a strong sense of community. And they're the common features in these blue zones. They don't have processed packaged muck masquerading as food in a box or a container that sits with a use-by date for 2 or 3 months. So they don't do any of that stuff. And except for the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, who don't tend to drink or have a lot of caffeine, the people in the other areas might have a couple of glasses of wine in the evening. Red wine in particular has the benefits. And also I think one of the big things there is olive oil as well. I know that in Sardinia it's pecorino cheese. In Okinawa, the Japanese island of Okinawa, they practice the thing, and for any Japanese listening, I apologize for my pronunciation here. It's called harihachu-bu, which is only eating to be 80% full. Now, I don't know if they have a thermometer in their stomach, but basically they keep their caloric intake down. They don't overeat.
But Ross,
I want to finish up the
you
story.
did mention
Sorry,
you did mention something that intrigues me, that I had a bit of a discussion with someone, a keto advocate in the gym today. You mentioned that these centenarian people living in blue zones can quite often have a pasta and then burn it off afterwards, right? Which is my thought. I think, like with like, for instance, if I go for a bike ride in the morning, I have some raisin toast with blueberry jam on it, and I don't have any protein until after I come back from the ride. I think that's more important there. But there's the school of thought that says that whole insulin response, that you should eliminate carbs altogether. What's your feeling on that? Especially in regard.
Nonsense. And can I say to you, I told my wife that I could make a car out of spaghetti. You should have seen her face when I was driving past her.
There's another dad joke. We love it. Okay.
The dad jokes, they'll be coming forever. Look, I think all this keto stuff is, I won't say it's nonsense, but it's too extreme. And can I say that if you're in your 30s and you want to go on the keto diet to lose weight, that's fine. But I've seen a handful of people over the age of 50 who want to burn fat pretty quickly. So they go into keto or paleo or something, and they have a heart attack. And let me tell you why. Because the abdominal fat they're trying to lose has also got a lot of inert chemicals sitting in it doing nothing. You pour the fat and the chemicals into the central circulation rapidly, it can overload an already overloaded circulation and induce a heart attack or a stroke in some people. So I would caution anyone over the age of 50 trying any sort of fad diet, and they are fad diets. I'm not against a high-fat, high-protein, low-carb diet as long as it's not as extreme. And a good Mediterranean diet has, it's the high carbs there are the pastas they have with their lunch, but also the strongest form of carbohydrate is fruit and vegetables, and that's the best thing for you. So I think that's really important.
But it doesn't does that have a spike in insulin levels? Does that affect?
Oh, no, not if you're having good natural stuff.
Okay.
There are certainly the high glycemic index fruits and foods. Some of them are. And I've got a patient who owns a stone fruit farm. And during the stone fruit season, he might have 15 apricots a day. His blood sugar goes through the roof.
Yeah.
Because it's too much.
Yeah.
No one's suggesting, I'm saying olive oil is very good for you, but not a bucket of it. Just a couple of teaspoons a day. Yeah. And a couple of pieces of fruit per day, but not 5 or 6 or 7. Yes. It's a bit like coffee. You have a couple of cups of coffee a day. We'll talk about the benefits of that. But if you have 6 a day, you increase your risk for a heart attack by 20%. So it's all about dose as well. But again, we can talk more about nutrition and other things in another podcast. But I just wanted to finish off with a story from one of the blue zones. And this is from a fellow very close to your heart. His name was Stamatis Moriatis. And he was living in New York. He was 65, heavy cigarette smoker, diagnosed with lung cancer, coughing blood, diagnosed with lung cancer. So he goes to the doctor in New York, says, look, Stamatis, you're very ill. You've got about 9 months to live. And I don't think any doctor should give people a time limit. So he goes and gets a couple of opinions. They'll say, yeah, other guy's right. You got 9 months to live. So he says to his married daughters, you stay here with your husbands. We're going back to live with mum and dad, so his parents, on the Greek island of Ikaria. So he goes back to Ikaria with his wife, and he starts living the Icarian lifestyle. But he's pretty sick, this guy. He's only a few months off death. So he starts eating the natural fruits and vegetables out of his parents' backyard. His friends from childhood came around to say goodbye, having a glass of wine with him just because they didn't have long to live. He starts having an afternoon sleep, starts reconnecting with his faith. He's walking gingerly around the village, goes to see the doctors after about 3 months. They examine him, Stamatis, not too bad. Come back in another 3 months. Comes back in 3 months. So 6 months later, no evidence of cancer. So anyhow, 25 years later, Stamatis decides to go back to New York to visit his daughters. So he goes back and he says, see how healthy I am? I'm going to show the doctors how healthy I'm going to go and visit them all. He couldn't because they were all dead.
I know.
Stomatus died on the Greek island of Icaria at the age of 104. And why? Because he went back to how our bodies should be treated, stopped smoking, of course, and went back to how our bodies should be treated, living the lifestyle we should say. And I believe you can find your own blue zone in our society, but you just have to work at it. And the problem is, I'll talk in another podcast about the 5 keys of being healthy, which is a really vital and the most important message I give anyone. But unfortunately, less than 10% of people practice those 5 keys. And I think that probably should be the topic of our next podcast, the 5 keys of being healthy.
But that's always an area that's really fascinated me about people returning to areas like that. And there are, I mean, you could call them in Western civilization, all the health retreats that people go to. We know a few of them. But they get back to, and the basic assumption there is that the body will heal itself if it's given the right conditions, environment to heal itself. And that means the right diet, obviously, but also the social interaction, the human connections, a spiritual belief, if you've got it, all that sort of stuff is really important. And a lot of GPs and specialists like yourself don't delve into that area, and they can't explain it. Like cancer specialists can't explain when there's spontaneous remission in people. They can't explain it.
There's another topic. We should.
What causes that? And the inference there is that there's a power happening in here or in here that's beyond physiological, that's having an effect. That is another area.
So many areas we need to talk about. But I think, I think we've probably said enough for today, and I think we should come back next time and we'll delve into the 5 keys of being healthy, because I think that's really important. So we look forward to seeing you all next time. And we should finish off with a listener question, which came from last week's podcast.
Yes. What was that?
Bill's a 54-year-old man. He said, look, I heard what you said about cholesterol, doctor, but I went to my GP because my cholesterol was 6.5, my HDL was 1.8, my triglycerides were 0.9, but the GP said my cholesterol was far too high. And I said, well, look, I heard this Walker bloke talking about a coronary calcium score. So I went off to get a calcium score with a script for the statin that the GP wanted to give me. And my calcium score was only 45. This guy's a 54-year-old man. And so what should I do about it? Should I take the statin? And the answer is no.
Yep.
If your calcium score is below 100, there is no significant benefit from being on a statin. So my comment to that person is please don't take the statin. Have another calcium score in 5 years. Listen next week for the 5 keys of being healthy, and we'll talk about other supplements you should take in that situation. But the 5 keys of being healthy, if you follow them, reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease by 83%. A statin drug reduces your risk by about 20% with the potential for many side effects, which we'll talk about on another occasion.
Okay, so, thanks, Ross. And thanks for listening, viewers. More information can be obtained from our website, which is seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com. seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com, and our email is hello@seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com. Thanks for your time, and farewell from both Ross and myself. Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.